Hello and welcome to Chile Talk. I'm Neil Davidson. As always, I am with, as it were, virtually Pete Lee. Hello, Pete.
Hello.
And we've promised you a couple more episodes on Elvis Costello's, on the Spanish version of Elvis Costello's classic album from the 1980s, whenever it was. But we're not going to do that now because we have bigger fish to fry. We're going to talk about the Chilean presidential election that's coming up, and I'm going to do a couple of episodes. This one we're going to just run through the main candidates again with a few more comments, and then the second one will be a quick tour of South American countries to see what they are saying about the Chilean elections and what kind of points of contact there might be between the countries. It is something continental going on. So Pete, okay, well, let's quickly go through who are the no-hopers.
Well, we've got the same 7 candidates we mentioned in a previous Chile talk. I think we're down to 2 who will probably qualify next Sunday in 7 days for the runoff election. So we've got 5 who I think are no-hopers now, although some are more no-hoper than others. Mm-hmm. For a start, we've got Eduardo Artes from the Patriotic Union. This is a communist splinter group associated with North Korea and various other things. He's not going to get more than 1 or 2% of the vote. He's out. Next up, we've got Mayo, Marco Enrique Ominami, who's from Chilean public life royalty, quite a charismatic guy, trained cinematographer.
And he stood before, hasn't he? He's a kind of serial contender.
Yes, this is his 4th effort. He's had a few punchy lines about left-leaning solidarity to take on the threat of a right-winger getting in, but he hasn't done particularly well in any of the polling, so I'm willing to count Mayo out. Now, another one who's a bit of a surprise omission from the running is Sebastián Sichel, who is
he was looking at one point. He was looking at one point like the favourite, wasn't he? He's a kind of centre-right candidate. He was the centre-right candidate.
The mainstream centre-right coalition has elected him in their primary to run. He's distanced himself sufficiently from Sebastián Piñera, who he used to work for and is extremely unpopular as the president at the moment. But his performance in the debates and in the general campaigning has been very weak. Little content, although all of the candidates have little content, and he just hasn't been very charismatic or very convincing. So Sichel is way out of the running. Another possibility is an interesting one is Franco Parisi, who isn't even in Chile. He's in Alabama. He has some legal problems in Chile. As soon as he steps foot in Chile, he's wanted for child support payments and some other things.
So that seems a very sort of silly loose end to have left lying around for a presidential candidate. But I think the sums of money involved are quite large, aren't they? He's been accused of not paying child support for a very long time now. So I don't know what that's doing for his image.
And he's suspected of trying to get hold of the funds that the Electoral Commission provides to candidates, official candidates, which happens around the world in various places. He's a fairly charismatic guy, and he's in his Zoom performances in presidential debates. He's had some zingers against other candidates, particularly against Gabriel Boric, who struggles with numbers, struggles with figures and perhaps logic in general. But I think Parisi has a ceiling. I mean, he's got an on-the-ground organisation, the Party for the People, for the Gente, and he's got a kind of middle-class support base, lower middle-class, small business support base. but it's not enough. I can see him getting 10% of the vote, something like that.
I'll just mention perhaps that although delinquency on child support payments is very high everywhere, it's particularly high in Chile. I would have to look up the exact figure, but it's extraordinarily high. I mean, the number of people who don't pay unless forced to by a court, I think, is kind of men, basically, is certainly far over 50%. I think it's kind of up towards 80%. So possibly he might have a base of support among other delinquent fathers who owe child support, and
Yes.
pretending to pay. Anyway, but it looks like he's out. Mm-hmm.
Yes, but done better than many expected. So he'll probably be in the over 10, maybe in the teens. And another candidate who's probably the closest to almost being in the running is Jasna Provoste, who's running with the old traditional centre-left coalition. She's from the Christian Democrats, but she's way to the left of the traditional Christian Democrat line. She's not very charismatic. She hasn't performed very well. Her policies are incoherent like everyone else's, and she hasn't made much of an impact. The only way I can see her getting enough votes to get into the second round, which would be in the mid-20s, mid-20% of the vote will probably get you into second place for the runoff. The only way that could happen is if some of the scandals that have been mounting among the two leading candidates really come to bear, including in their hard, committed voter demographics.
Got it. So was that the 5 probable no?
That's the 5. Provoste is the closest to make.
So she, in case we didn't mention, she's you mentioned she's the kind of centre, although from the Christian Democrats, although from a centre-right, background, she is actually the centre-left candidate, kind of the inheritor of the Concertación, whose name changes every now and then. I forget what it is now. But she's not done well. So leaving the field clear for Gabriel Boric, who is further to the left and is heading this Frente Amplio coalition, which includes, among others, the Communist Party, doesn't it?
Yes, alongside Frente Amplio, we have the Communist Party, the mainstream Communist Party, which is the oldest.
Has been in government. It was in different governments in the Concertación, wasn't it? I mean,
yes,
it's like Italy. The Communist Party is allowed into government, and nobody really objects too strongly.
Except for the couple of times that it's been banned from existing in the late 1940s, and of course during the military government of Pinochet. But it's around, and it has some grip within what is called the Apruebo Dignidad coalition. Of course, Apruebo Dignidad echoes this sentiment that Chile needs a new constitution, needs to approve of a new constitution, which is a very popular position. So we've got the Communist Party and Frente Amplio, which originated as a student politics movement around 2011, and eventually became Frente Amplio, I believe in 2017, as recently as that, maybe a little earlier. So
that's it. So this is a new formation. We remember well Gabriel Boric appearing as a student leader. We almost feel we saw him in nappies and diapers, and he's still very young, isn't he? He doesn't look very much like a president.
Yes, he's the minimum age, as in the US, 35 is the minimum age to become president. And I would say my theory about the campaign of Boric and the communists and the rest of Frente Amplio is that they are trying not to win the presidency. They are trying to win as many deputy and Senate places and other political offices to pave the way for a viable government during more favourable economic times.
I see. So you're saying they just don't think they could do what they wanted in the present context, because you said the candidates lack content, but I mean, Boric, that coalition does have some content. I think they want to increase taxes, the tax take, by 8% of GDP. I just cut the recording there so we could go away and check our figures, because Gabriel Boric has made rather a fool of himself on sort of live television, hasn't he, Pete, by getting his figures like wildly off for things like, you know, tax revenues.
By orders of magnitude.
By orders of magnitude, sort of trillions instead of billions, or thousands instead of millions, all that stuff. So we went and checked our figures. Now, the current tax take in Chile is just a bit over 20% of gross domestic product. And Boric is proposing to increase it over 2 presidential terms by 8% of GDP, which, you know, one commentator called a kind of fiscal tsunami. It's pretty enormous in that lapse of time, isn't it? I mean, Europe obviously did it. Lots of countries have increased taxes up to 50% or even more of GDP, but not that quickly, I don't think.
No, it's drastic and very ambitious and very hard to get taxes out of people. Tax evasion is not particularly difficult.
The system's not very efficient, really, is it? And a lot of wealth is held by the super rich. It's a very unequal country, and they're pretty good at, I think, putting their money offshore and so on when needs be.
Realistically, the only way to get more public monies is to tax sales tax, value-added tax.
Which there already is one of 20%, so it's not low by any means at the moment.
So that's going to affect the middle classes and the poor.
That's right. And Boric, as people always do when they want to raise taxes, is talking about reducing evasion and taxing the super rich, both things that, you know, tend not to work out quite as well as hoped. So he's got a program. He does have some substance, but you don't think he's really serious because it's just not the right time to implement it, is what you're saying?
Well, I get the feeling that he's installing regular small errors, sometimes deliberately and sometimes simply allowing them to develop. Huge mistakes over figures, mistakes with his aesthetics. You know, he has this sort of almost Mao-esque pictures of himself rolling around. He doesn't seem ready. And I do suspect that the concept of what they're doing is to maneuver the coalition into a more powerful position cameralistically, that is how it operates in the Congress, because it will need favourable economic conditions, which are not available in the near future, in order to operate the way it wants to operate.
Interesting. Okay, though it must be said that Chile's fiscal position is quite sound. The country was very recently actually in surplus. It had no national debt once you took account of assets abroad. But yeah, certainly they have deteriorated, of course, with the COVID crisis. But okay, well, interesting. I wonder if he's told his coalition partners this.
Well, that it may be that the Communist Party is running the show behind the scenes. They are a very organised organisation, so we just don't know. So as I see it, Boric and Pueblo Dignidad are trying not to win, whereas their opposition, a dark horse, Jose Antonio Cast, is not trying to win. It never occurred to him that he might win until about a month and a half ago, when the candidates from the centre-right, Sichel, and from the centre, Provoste and others, have failed to perform. So a candidate who's not even running many deputies, many candidates for deputy nationwide, is now in the position where he was looking like he was even leading the opinion polls. The opinion polls shut off 2 weeks before the actual election, the first round of the election. And it looked like he had come up from nowhere and slightly overtaken Boric, which is interesting. And to the surprise of everyone, it seemed that Jose Antonio Cast was the only one who was performing well in the media. He was quite charming, presenting himself very well. An interesting datum about Jose Antonio Cast is he is if he becomes the next president, he is probably the first Chilean president who does not have indigenous descent. Because all of the presidents from the 19th century had colonial roots, and basically all of the Chileans had, and almost all of them today, have indigenous descent, especially the people with Spanish and Basque names. So Jose Antonio Cast could be the first president without indigenous descent, which is quite interesting. And he is sometimes portrayed as a far-right candidate, but so much space has opened up in the centre that he's been able to present himself as almost a voice towards the centre, with a certain authenticity about his convictions, you know, which are things like doesn't believe in abortion or gay marriage, or things like inessential sort of Jacob Rees-Mogg sort of style positions that are just a bit colourful to some people, but are absolutely infuriating to others. And he seemed to be going very well, softening his position. So the international media positioning of him as a Chilean Bolsonaro, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, obviously, or a Chilean Trump figure, a right-wing populist, didn't seem to be coming to bear in his campaign until Friday night. It's now Sunday, we're talking. So 9 days before the election, 9 sleeps before the election, he made a mistake. And that mistake is very, very severe.
Let's hear it. Okay, what was the mistake?
The mistake was, recently, just a few days ago, we had an election in Nicaragua, which was a sham election run by Daniel Ortega, who's a originally left-wing populist, but now essentially a dictator, and ran a sham election.
Which elicited from the from the Communist Party. Well, they approved of the election and considered it a great triumph for kind of anti-Americanism and all their favourite sort of causes, right? So that was a big unforced, well, it wasn't an error, was it? I mean, it's perfectly consistent with communist history and ideology, but it looked bad for the coalition. It looked bad for Boric, who distanced himself. He distanced himself immediately from those remarks, but you know, clearly he's in coalition with people who do not believe at all in democracy. So that was 1 point up for the right, wasn't it? But now that advantage has been lost.
Well, it looked so silly that it did seem to fit my suspicion that that Boric and the communists are not actually trying to win. It was so silly, so choreographically silly. It surprised me, and Cass seemed to be going the right route, which is kind of skirting the issue, because there are enough people, particularly in Latin America, willing to back crazy dictatorships. That's not a problem. But unfortunately for Cast, he drew himself into a terrible mistake in an interview with one of the most prominent sort of radio and internet sources, Radio Bio Bio. He said that Augusto Pinochet, the dictator president of Chile from 1973 to 1990, did not prevent opposition forces from running in an election and allowed free elections and his replacement by an elected president.
Which of course is true, but as far as it goes, but you're saying, you know, it wasn't presented with all the nuance perhaps in the media.
He didn't say it in a way that protected himself from his words being quoted to reflect the idea that Pinochet had allowed free opposition during all his period in charge, which of course was not true. Moreover, you could say that the official opposition that was allowed to run after it was decided that it was decided in a plebiscite in 1988 that Pinochet could not continue with the backing of the people. The official opposition also had a level of, let's say, scrutiny from the military government. It wasn't an entirely open process. It was a negotiated process. But the way that Cast expressed himself has led to all kinds of meme-like bastings of the sham plebiscites in, I believe, 1978, when world opinion was turning against Pinochet in the Carter years, and of course the approval of the 1980 Constitution, which was with a sham plebiscite as well.
So a subject on the whole best avoided. Okay,
yes.
we promised a quick roundup. I think that's it. It's I guess it's too close to call. I think we can say I don't have a prediction.
Yeah, well, what we're going to see if these two do get through is we're going to see their voters plus people who are voting against the other one forming the voting blocks in the second round. But that will be another discussion.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I guess we'll leave it there for the moment. And thank you for joining us. And see you, I hope, next time here on Chile Talk.
Many thanks.